Hello, everyone. I am Rhonda Lee Chapman, your host for People, Nature, Big Ideas, and I'm excited to share some big news with you all today. We have a very special episode with a very special guest joining, and that's Dr. Carrie Besnett-Hauser, our incoming president and CEO at Trust for Public Land. Since Carrie's official start date is not until October 1st of this year, we just wanted to take some time to welcome her and get to know her just a little bit. You should know for now, Carrie is wrapping up her 11-year tenure as president and CEO of Colorado Mountain College, where she's made significant strides in expanding the reach and the impact of the college by responding to the needs of the surrounding industries, the services, the interests, and definitely the populations in the high mountain community, including providing both 2-year and 4-year degree programs, as well as having the college receive a Hispanic Serving Institution designation. If you're tuning in to People, Nature, Big Ideas for the first time, you should know that TPL is a national nonprofit dedicated to creating parks and protecting land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. We've been at this for over 50 years, and our work cuts across urban parks, schoolyards, trails, and conserving vast natural landscapes, working always in close partnership with community, particularly those who have been historically excluded from these conversations about land and outdoor access. This upcoming conversation is going to be a fantastic opportunity for TPL staff, volunteers, and supporters to have a glimpse into what makes Carrie tick. But it's also a chance for everybody in the listening audience to hear her initial thoughts on leading TPL towards its next chapter in creating equitable outdoor spaces for all. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Carrie. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great.
Welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas. I'm really glad you're here. And we were talking once before, you had shared that you have listened to every single People, Nature, Big Ideas. So from the bottom of my heart and from our production team and from TPL, we want to say thank you for being a fan and a follower. We need those numbers.
Absolutely. I feel like I have to sort of pinch myself that I'm here myself. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. This episode is really an opportunity to introduce you to the TPL staff, to our followers, to our friends, to our supporters. So let's get into it. I know that you and I already have a great value and appreciation for storytelling. We know that storytelling is an experience that can be so compelling, and it's one of those things that provides an opportunity for folks to really connect. And I also know that people's origin stories are really important. And so if you're okay with it, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your own personal origin story. But basically, I just want to know, who are you? Where'd you grow up? Where are the places that you consider home?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And again, thank you for having me. It's a delight to sort of start this journey this way with you. So I'm excited about that. You know, I've kind of weaved around a little bit, and I would say that generally home is the Rocky Mountain West. I was born and raised in northern Arizona, Flagstaff to be specific. And so born and raised there, Coconino National Forest, very much an outdoors community. So probably from a very, very young age, that was definitely seeded in me. Went to college in Tucson. So I am definitely a native Arizonan.
Okay.
And I'm a diehard Arizona Wildcat too. So if anybody meets me, it's all red and blue, and it's go Arizona and bear down. So
wait. But before you go on, is that college?
It is.
I don't know.
It is
okay.
University of Arizona in Tucson. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm an Arizona Wildcat. So
okay.
I went up to California. I lived in Los Angeles for about 7 years to work, and I was also doing graduate school there at UCLA. I had little stints in Washington, D.C., short stint in Kansas City, but mostly since then I've been in Colorado. So almost 25 years in Colorado, a little time in Boulder, Denver for a number of years, and for the last little over a decade on the western slope of Colorado. So it's been a mix of urban and rural, mostly the west, although, lots of travel and stuff to the east. So right now my home is in Glenwood Springs, Colorado with my husband, Jeff, and our yellow lab, Gracie.
All right. I love it. And it's really interesting. I have kind of a similar path, but kind of in reverse. I grew up in a more city environment on the East Coast, but when I found my way out west, it was something that you just can't really shake. It so just true. Gets hold of you, and it holds on forever, and it never leaves you. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
The other thing that I have learned in my research is the love for mountains that you have. And I know, even though I live close to the heart of the nation's capital, I still very much consider myself a mountain girl. And I also know that you have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. You have reached the base camp of Mount Everest, right? You have some summited Mount Rainier, which when I flew over Mount Rainier for the first time, I totally broke into tears. Mm-hmm. One of the most beautiful experiences. And you have climbed all 58 of the 14ers in the Colorado mountains. Anyway, you have a tremendous love for the mountains also, but you also have a tremendous love for the river. So basically, guess what I'm getting at is you just love being outside.
That's true.
And so what I'm curious about, and you started to touch on this, is how has being outside and your love for the outdoors really shaped you into the person that you are today? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those connections.
I think it definitely ties to sort of my passion for this work. When you feel sort of privileged to have these experiences and want everyone to feel welcome, mm-hmm. and everyone to have them, should that be their choice, mm-hmm. that's really something that speaks to me and calls to me. So, I mentioned growing up in Northern Arizona, and the Grand Canyon was a very important place to me. As soon as I could carry a pack, my dad and I would hike trails to the river. Mm-hmm. Importantly, that was down first and up last. Mm-hmm. So we'll come back to that. And so we started chipping away at trails. Mm-hmm. And that just became sort of part of my kind of heritage. 6th grade class, Mr. Dawson's class, we learned every single layer of the Grand Canyon. We learned the heritage, the artifacts, the peoples who had been there, the animals, all those things. Mm-hmm. And so it became sort of part of my DNA, mm-hmm. And was really important to me. And certainly the connection to Indigenous peoples. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was something that was seeded in me very, very early. And growing up in that region, right adjacent to the Navajo and the Hopi reservations, I played a lot of sports. A lot of my teammates were Navajo, Hopi women. Long story short, I make it to Colorado, and then I sort of shift the orientation in the sense that you climb up first and then down last, right? So started chipping away at sort of the mountains here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I ever thought I would finish the 14ers, but I just, started doing those with friends and family and learning Colorado. And that's a way to learn where you live, right? Mm-hmm. Is to get out there and to do that. So, chipped away a little bit, then kind of got distracted, as you said, and kind of went to other places around the world. I'm particularly interested in developing nations and climbing peaks there where you use local guides. Mm-hmm. So, obviously in Nepal, Machu Picchu, mm-hmm. you use local guides, obviously there. For the Everspace Camp, it was as much my interest in sort of the heritage and the legacy of Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary. And to do sort of the journey of hospitals and schools and sort of, it was the ripple effect of that summit. Mm-hmm. As much as it was the summit itself. That was super interesting to me. So we trekked around and all that, came back to Colorado and sort of started chipping away. And then I kind of got close enough. And then I thought, well, maybe I could finish these things. Yeah. And I moved to the Roaring Fork Valley. And some of the most difficult ones are literally out our window.
Okay.
So I look at them every day. I thought, well, okay, let's start doing these. And my husband and I do a lot of them together. So that's a really important thing as well. So I think back to your question about why are they important and why the commitment, it's a whole host of things. One, I think sort of being outside and being in these places where it is you and the universe, mm-hmm. It gives you a different perspective. It prompts you to think about different things. It helps you appreciate why those places are so important and why that we need to protect them, mm-hmm. and why they should absolutely be accessible to anyone. Mm-hmm. So, that's kind of where it comes from. It comes from picking a challenge and knowing that it's going to be a grunt and it's mm-hmm. going to be hard. And mm-hmm. sometimes you won't succeed. Rainier is a good example. I tried once and didn't succeed. Okay. And had to go back and didn't think I would go back. And it took a while to sort of kind of recharge my batteries and sort of think about doing that again, because the first time wasn't a good experience. And we have those in life, right? Mm-hmm. We think, I'm not doing that again. I quit. I'm not speaking to that person. I'm not engaging in that conversation, whatever the case may be. Uh-huh. And sometimes if you put yourself in a different framework, those are some of the lessons I think that are taught from the mountains and from being in those outdoor spaces. So it's not just the climb. I mean, it is a great way to be fit, both mentally and mm-hmm. physically fit. Mm-hmm. It's the experience. It's having a start. It's having a destination. It's knowing that that's probably not the conclusion of the destination either. So there's a lot of analogies, I think, to those things. And it's why I love these places. And I'll also say that my favorite outdoor activity is walking the dog in the morning. Yeah. And looking at the mountains, because mm-hmm. that's where we live. I look at this beautiful Mount Sopris, which is not a 14er. It's just shy of 13,000 feet. And it is like right there in our vision every single day. Moody, different. Sometimes there's snow. I mean, it's just this kind of reminder of sort of how small we are in the universe.
Yeah.
So walking Gracie and looking at that peak every day.
Yeah. As I was doing the research, looking for things for us to talk about, where are different connecting points, I also discovered a TED Talk.
Yes.
That you had given. And it was earlier this year. I think it's from March of 2024. Yep. And it affirmed some of my own thinking about how we define space and place and what it means to be inclusive and to be adaptable, right? Given the changing kind of conditions of the lives and the communities that we're working within. And the conversation was about the spark that kind of led to Colorado Mountain College being what it is. And I often think about the spark. It's also similar to me as like an origin story, right? They're kind of one and the same. In your TED Talk, you were really talking mostly about Colorado Mountain College, and you were talking about its origin story, its park. But what I'd like to learn about is your own work and your leadership at Colorado Mountain College. While it might be a challenge to summarize everything that you have done over this decade plus, I'm curious to know a little bit more about it, particularly the power of transformation and growth for you as a professional, and not only for you, but also the constituents. And that means like the student body, the surrounding community, the faculty, the staff. I mean, there's so many layers to it, not unlike the very many layers in the Grand Canyon, right? Sure. The things that you learned about there can totally apply here. Yep. But a great deal of interest in the needs that you have to attend to when you're dealing with so many dynamics and so many moving parts. Yep. So at Colorado Mountain College, 10 years, I really would love to hear about some of the keys to your success.
Well, thanks. It's a really special place. I'm so proud of it and sort of everything it represents. And I'm really proud of the opportunity I've been able to tell its story on the TED Talk. Its founder, who will be 97 in September.
Wow.
He's still here. And so, to always continue to pay tribute to those that came before us, I think is a really big part, maybe starting at the end. So when I arrived at Colorado Mountain College about 11 years ago, and I would say this about every sort of step in my career, and I feel really fortunate this way, that they've all had sort of a mission and a purpose that has just really aligned. And they've also been really timely for me. For us, it was a move back to Colorado, which was really important at the time. And to land in the mountains was fabulous. And the college was, a little bit of a well-kept secret. I knew a little bit about it from sort of my other sort of roles in Colorado. And I'd always kind of kept my eye on it, sort of, wow, what is that place out there? Anyway, the job came open. And this is also a good sort of lesson for, listeners and others, is that I had sort of said something to the universe and a mentor at the time. And I said, if there was ever a college presidency that I'd be interested in, it'd be this one. And then the job came open.
There you go.
And he nominated me.
Excellent.
11 years later. I mean, I was literally interviewing right about this time 11 years ago.
Wow.
And we landed. We landed in the Valley. And, the college had gone through a pretty rough patch before my arrival, as organizations do. I mean, that's just natural. And so the things that I would point to were learning, really learning about the region. And for me, in that particular case, it was pointing my attention in first. A lot of times when a college president starts, it's the listening tour and it's sort of, you go out and you meet with donors and all that. And it was a place that needed the internal attention first. And so I really tried to do that for the staff and the faculty and the students. And it helped me learn what the possibilities were for the college. And similar to Trust for Public Land, there was a strategic planning process just commencing. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and it's one of the reasons I'm really excited about TPL is that we'll get to craft some of that and sort of put our sights out towards what are the next things that we need to attend to, internally, externally, all that. So a lot of the lessons were listening, not making huge assumptions right off the bat, understanding the heritage of the organization. And so I think the other thing that I always look towards is how do you do sort of a yes and that means always recognize the history of the organization, because people are always going to say, right, we've done it that way. This is what the organization means. This is what we do. This is what we've always done, whatever the case may be. And that's natural. And the world has changed. I mean, I just think in 10 years,
of course,
at being at any organization and being a college president during a global pandemic, during all the sort of social, sort of call it unrest or evolution that the world has been through, and to be in a place of learning and exploration where everyone is welcome, and to try to figure out how to knit that together. CMC is 11 campuses. We're spread out all over these kind of rural resort communities in Colorado. Mountain passes are not easy to get to. You have to get in between. Being visible, even when you're not visible, was something that I certainly learned. Being someone people could connect to, whether it was sitting next to each other or through an email or some other way, being out as much as I possibly could to make those connections, because it's one brand and it's really localized, and weaving those together and finding the both. So for me, it was certainly a huge leadership lesson. It emphasized to me that I kind of live at the 20,000 foot sort of level, maybe 30 sometimes. I'm a fairly detailed person, but I also recognize you can't sort of focus on both. So to build a team of incredible professionals, trust them to do their jobs, know that you're not going to be in their backyard or even in their same building or space most of the time, empowers people to do the work. And if you can always tie it back to the mission and the purpose and the impact, everything else sort of works. And so I come at this next opportunity with great hope. So I'm really excited. It's been an incredible journey. You recognize that you can't do it by yourself. You have to surround yourself with really great people, and you have to surround yourself with people that are not always going to agree with you, that are going to sort of push back, that are going to bring a different perspective, and are going to move an organization forward into a future that's unknown.
So one of the things I think you know already, Carrie, is that TPL's mission is about connecting everyone to the great outdoors and to nature, regardless of their zip code. And it really allows us to have the ability to have impact across various domains throughout the country, from rural to urban. And we work very intently within communities that are highly racially and ethnically diverse. And I understand that during your time at Colorado Mountain College, CMC, the college became designated as a Hispanic serving institution. And I have my own perspectives as to why that became important, but I'd love to hear from you, like why it was important to you and the institution. I know it wasn't something that had to happen overnight, but can you tell me, like, what was the impetus for even making that designation, and what was the process? What did you learn from that?
Thanks for asking. We talked a little bit earlier about sort of the journey and sort of the transformation and all that. And, when I first arrived and listened and learned, I also look a lot of data. I'm a kind of a research geek. I like to look at data. I like to sort of ground myself in what does the data tell us? And the data said we were 13% Hispanic Latino enrollment. And yet some of our high schools and our K-12 pipelines were 50, 60, 70. Some of the schools were 90% Latino students. And if you went to K-6, it was even higher. Even in these very, very affluent communities, which a lot of people visit, the backbone communities don't necessarily reflect what that visitor population is, nor did the enrollment of the college. So we looked at that very carefully and said, how do we better reflect the communities that we serve? And so I spent a lot of time going out and talking to chamber groups and Kiwanis clubs and business groups and, the state capitol and legislators and everything else, and said, we have some work to do to better reflect the communities that we serve. And some of it wasn't just more enrollment, it was retaining students. So there's one thing about inviting someone in. It's also about how they continue to feel welcome and how they succeed while they're there. So long story short, it took about 6 years. And to be designated a Hispanic serving institution or a minority serving institution, there needs to be a minimum of 25% of your enrollment reflects whatever that population is. And so we hit that 25%. We're almost at 30% a couple of years ago, and really exciting. And we were very intentional about that. We changed what our front desks looked like and who greeted students and who greeted families. We thought about what it meant to be a bilingual staff or faculty member. How did we have our campus facilities better reflect welcoming everyone into them, and not just welcoming them, but getting them across the graduation stage? That was really important. So one of the things I'm very, very proud of is that we have closed those equity gaps. We've not only become a Hispanic serving institution, because that's the region where we are, we've closed those equity gaps. So our Latino students are actually outperforming all other students at the college right now. Not in every discipline. So we're still those are the more granular, like that's where we're going next into those data to sort of understand whether it's nursing or, pick Hispanic males, for example, like how do we really look at who succeeds and who doesn't in certain contexts. It was a very intentional journey for the entire institution. Everyone has a touch on students, whether they're in a classroom or they're sitting behind a desk and they're processing financial aid. Our goal was to make sure we were reflective and everybody got on board. Part of it was a strategic planning process. Part of it was everyone hearing the same message, everybody singing from the same playbook, and knowing that that was really where we were going. It's a constant evolution to understand who's not at the table. And I think there's lots of parallels with TPL and the outdoors. So
that sounds about right. It's almost like you're on the same path. We're on this journey together. And like going into this transition to TPL, you've started to touch on it a little bit and thinking about going from working in an institution of higher education and now coming into a national nonprofit that is very much focusing on connecting people to the outdoors and nature, and the shift that had to occur in your head. And what I didn't know before was like that kind of speaking out loud to the universe. If there were ever this opportunity at a college, this would be the one. So now I'd like to know what the shift was, or did you speak to the universe about coming to Trust for Public Land? So what was that shift? Talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it was a shift as much as it was a part of the path. Okay. It seemed like a really natural progression. We talked a little bit before about, just a great love for the outdoors. And, Colorado Mountain College, that's our purpose as well. Our purpose is to serve the outdoor and hospitality economies of the mountain region of Colorado. That's pretty simple. And those communities pay for us. We're uniquely financed by those local communities through a property tax. And we are an independent taxing entity and a government. I have an elected board. And so that sort of return on investment is always, in my mind. And so we train students to be environmental scientists, to study sustainability studies. We have a public lands management program. We teach students to operate ski resorts. Okay. And we have one of the few, if not only, avalanche science programs in the entire country because of where we are. If you think about where we are, we have campuses in Breckenridge and Aspen and Steamboat Springs and Leadville and these places where people come to ski and visit and, and be tourists in a lot of cases. So, and we hopefully train them to go back out and serve in these communities. Certainly we train the nurses and the police officers and people that are sort of backbone economies, teachers and all that. And really sort of this outdoor brand has been really part of CMC. So I felt like, well, that was partly what drew me to the college, was that mission and sort of, kind of what we do and the disciplines that CMC focuses on, and my own interests clearly as well. Yeah, I put it out to the universe. For the folks that I sort of kept saying, well, what are you going to do next? And what do you think you're going to do next? This is the pivot, or maybe the next step that I had hoped to make, whether it was TPL or something in the conservation outdoor industry space. I don't know that I knew exactly what that was. Sure. And when TPL became an option, and I kind of went through this search process, every single step was this magical fit for me and what I wanted to do next. So there's a lot of parallels, and I'm really excited, and there's a lot I don't know. Yeah. So some of that's terrifying, to make the shift. I haven't started a new job in 11 years. Right. And I'm really excited, and there's a lot I don't know, and I hope that maybe some of that fresh eye also will be beneficial to the organization. So that's kind of where I am.
I appreciate that. And I think it's also, helpful for me and others to hear that there is a little bit of fear, right?
Sure.
Because to come in and not have any at all would be horrifying.
Exactly.
Frankly. It's to know that you're coming in with an approach like, well, maybe this isn't wrong. Maybe we need to circle back. Sure. Maybe we need to ask questions.
Of course.
And so that gets me to this other question. I've been with TPL for 3.5 years, and I think I discover something new almost every week. There's just another, layer that's peeled away from me. And I was like, I had no idea, didn't see that coming. And so at this point, as you were just saying, it's impossible for you to know what you don't know. You started to touch on these little elements that started to light the way to come to TPL or some other entity in this conservation space. And so when you think about what drew you into TPL and where your imagination takes you, so it's a new venture. You're climbing a new mountain. This is true. This is going to be a 15er. Let me tell you. When you think about it that way, like, is there any kind of imagination that comes to mind? Like, you were able to succeed so many great things at Colorado Mountain College, but what is it about TPL? Like, what do you imagine?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the pieces and the parts and the things that that just really spoke to me, and what I think makes TPL really unique.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked a little bit about heritage, and we talked a little bit about sort of, kind of where I grew up and where I've lived. I've lived in really big urban cities, LA and Denver, and you pick them.
Kansas City.
And I've also lived in rural places. I grew up in northern Arizona, pretty rural area. I live in this sort of rural resort kind of mountain communities now. The blend of what TPL does in both urban and rural settings, and I would also add the emphasis around tribal communities, I think is second to none, and is so inspiring. There probably is some risk to just being distracted. Do we do this, or do we do this, or do we do this? And hopefully it's that kind of yes and how do you stay focused enough, and how is it really impactful? I mean, we have the same sort of challenges at Colorado Mountain College. Do we start a new discipline? Do we phase out a discipline? Do we do this in every location? Do we only do it in a certain location because that's the local economy or whatever? So I'll be interested to learn a little bit about how, you and I walked through a park for Denver's first, urban park yesterday. How does TPL make those choices? Where does it make the most sense? My assumption, and certainly through my research, and the other thing that really drew me to this is just the connection to community and working with people. We're not doing this to, we're doing this with. We are helping. We are part of hopefully solutions and opportunities for communities, whatever that community looks like. So those are things that certainly drew me. And, the fact that it's sort of, the big picture and umbrella is all around the outdoors. And, I love the sort of land for people context. And I also think a little bit about people for land in the sense that if we have an opportunity to protect these places so that they continue to restore us. I mean, it's so circular. It's so organic. Like there's not one end point and one starting point. So those things really excite me as well. And, the national focus, I mean, I've been in a big distributed organization with lots of campuses. And so the parallels are very clear to do this at a national level and to learn about, what's happening in Atlanta and what's happening in, just places that I, in my current context, I don't, frequent as often. Those things really excite me as well. So I look forward to meeting a lot of the team. I look forward to hearing about and learning about these projects and these initiatives through their lens and through the lens of the communities that ultimately are the, that's where the impact is on the ground. And so the on the ground impact is magic. I mean, it's just a really compelling draw for me. And so I hope to add some value to that. And I hope to learn a whole lot about it. And there's a lot of experts out there that know a lot more than I do. So I'm really excited.
Well, I think that the yes and attitude is the way. There's a lot of yes and happening all the time. And so I really appreciate that. And in terms of being surrounded with people who are committed and knowledgeable, there's no shortage of that.
I'm sure that's true.
So that's.
And by the way, I heard that in my homework and my own due diligence as I was talking to a few folks in this space around the country and have access to a few of them, to a person. And I would say this to all the TPL staff that might be listening. Every one of them said this is a staff that is unmatched. I never heard otherwise. And it was really affirming. I think I knew that sort of, intuitively. And you just sort of look at the work and you see kind of what's out there and the, what you can see as you're doing your journalistic research, right? I was doing the same thing as a candidate.
That's right.
That affirmation about the team and the work that the organization does was really powerful.
Excellent. Yeah. I like hearing that. You heard it here first, folks. So coming back to, staying grounded in who you are as a human being and talking about the various levels of our day-to-day in the world, this is a really challenging time globally for a host of reasons. I think about all the conditions that people are living with and all of the causes, what have you. And so when you think about the various areas of concern, I'm curious what yours might be. And not about TPL per se, but just about like the different challenges that people just in the United States alone are facing when they're looking to connect with nature. What are some of those challenges that kind of make your heart beat a little bit faster sometimes when we think about solutions? As you mentioned, we always want to be on the right side of history, right? We want to be on the solution so that when we are ancestors, we can say we did our part. Right. So what are some of the things that come to mind for you?
I mean, some of them that are just constantly, we are in the middle of the summer in July and we're sitting in Denver and it's going to be 105 degrees today, I think. that's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Living in sort of the western slope of Colorado, we're just waiting for the next wildfire. I live in the Roaring Fork Valley, and, with some frequency, you have a wildfire, several years ago, a big wildfire, it completely devastated Glenwood Canyon, which is literally the portal of a massive interstate.
Mm-hmm.
Major rains came in 6 months later and devastated that entire canyon with rock slides and everything else, and, cut off people from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, those things, certainly I think scare all of us. Another thing that, I've sort of experienced in the last number of years, I've served on a couple of boards. One in particular was the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. I chaired that commission during a ballot initiative that prompted the reintroduction of gray wolves in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very controversial. It was a very narrowly passed ballot measure, fairly urban supported, not particularly supported in rural communities. And that's where the reintroduction would occur. It really underscored for me, again, which is really unfortunate, is this urban-rural divide.
Mm.
And so bringing people back together and the process that we had to go through, and stakeholders and public meetings, and really having anybody from, Wild Earth Guardians to the Cattlemen's Association come into a room together.
Mm-hmm.
Those were challenging meetings to sort of facilitate and try to get people to a place where they could find compromise, because there wasn't an alternative to compromise, because that was law.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot. TPL has done some incredible work. Fishers Peak, I was on the commission, and I was serving on the Great Outdoors Colorado board during the Fishers Peak acquisition, which was incredibly exciting in Colorado. I mean, such a beautiful property and such an incredible partnership that made that happen. And, the community of Trinidad. And I mean, it's a really feather in so many caps of the organizations that work to make that happen. And I'm very hopeful that there will be more Fishers Peaks and that kind of acquisition in the future. And a lot of the folks that might be prone to make that happen own title to very large ranches. Mm-hmm. And if they're angry and upset about something like wolf reintroduction, or pick something else, and vice versa, I'm sure there's very good parallels, from an urban perspective and context. If you close the door because you feel like you weren't at the table in the beginning, I worry that we're going to lose opportunities for those things. So I would put it back to the positive side and say part of what I'm really excited about is TPL serving as that convener and serving as a listener and helping move projects forward that feel like that yes and feel like people had buy-in and it was with them and not to them. And so those are things that give me a little anxiety.
Sure.
And it's hard work.
Yeah.
And it's continuous.
Yeah.
And it evolves over time.
So Carrie, this has been a lovely conversation. And I just want to kind of close the conversation about, like, what is it that you are most proud of when you look back on everything that you've experienced and the things that you've been able to build, maybe rebuild, the things that you really are proud of when you look back. Yeah. The things that just really touch your soul.
My current experience at Colorado Mountain College is just, I've just gone through sort of this farewell tour. I've been to every campus, I've met with donors, I'm sort of closing out this, really significant chapter. And it's easier knowing that I have something really exciting and that has so many dots to connect. A couple of the things that I would say specifically about Colorado Mountain College, and I've not been shy to say this as I've been, kind of going through this transition, is I'm really proud of a team. And I talked about it a little bit earlier. You cannot do these roles, any of us, none of us can do our role by ourselves. Particularly if you're, quote, the leader, whether that's a title or whatever, you are not successful unless everyone else is successful. I was part of the original staff that helped to create the Daniels Fund, which is one of the largest foundations in the Rocky Mountain region in the early 2000s. And Bill Daniels, who passed away and made that happen by virtue of his death, he used to say, "You don't work for me, I work for you. And if I work for you and help you succeed, the organization succeeds, and certainly I succeed as a leader." And so I have that quote sort of on my wall. As somebody who's got a little bit of a sort of sports and athletic background, I do see sort of things kind of from a perspective of a coach or an athlete. And you want to have really great players on a team. And my job is to be the coach. If somebody leaves, you have somebody that's been training for that role, or, whatever the case may be. You have donors, you have owners, you have spectators, you have the tools and the equipment that they need, that they can rest from time to time. They can bring themselves completely to the team. There's one story that I think I would share that I reflected on recently, and that's the story of the fact that the college acquired 35 acres of land in Montezuma County, which is near the Four Corners, if you know a map of Colorado, in the 1970s, long before I was there, clearly. And it took me a year or two to discover, I'm like, why does the college own land in Montezuma County, near kind of Mesa Verde and sort of that area? Well, it turns out that the college had acquired this for, the benefit of students and faculty to go and do field research and archaeology and all that. And so next visit down, I went out with some folks from the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center who had worked that parcel, who had visited with some of our faculty and staff over the years. And they were really worried that we were going to sell it because it was so archaeologically sensitive and important. I mean, you could see the shields, you could see pottery shards. I mean, you knew, any place in that part of the world is going to be very, very important archaeologically and very rich. And many, many tribes have made that sort of region home. So long story short, I came back and sort of talked to my board, talked to the leaders, this great leadership team, and said, are we the best, quote, owners or should we have title to this property? And might it make sense for us to do something different? So we went through a whole exploration, and the team did an incredible job. We reached out to tribes. We worked with Crow Canyon. We worked with local organizations, land trusts, and others in that region to say what might make the most sense. Great Outdoors Colorado came down and did a site visit. And we finally found, and the tribe sort of spoke back to us, tribal representatives said, we don't know if gifting it to one tribe makes sense because there have been so many in this area. So would there be an opportunity for us to transfer it perhaps to an entity that would incorporate all the tribes in that region, and we would still have access to it, but we wouldn't own the parcel. So we ended up about a year ago transferring title to the Archaeological Conservancy, which is based out of Albuquerque. And there will be an advisory board that consists of representatives of the college, the Archaeological Conservancy, Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, all the tribes that have some activity in the area or have had some influence. And I don't know how often a public institution gives something away like that, and particularly land. And the college had been through a whole, sort of conversation about, land acknowledgements. And we have benefited from the gifts of land over the years, over 60 years, and probably have about 2,000 acres on which our campuses sit. And so every campus had gone through this journey about what was the heritage of that landscape. And rather than sort of a land acknowledgement alone, this was an opportunity to really express a really important gesture. And coming full circle, I'm getting a little choked up. This is part of my heritage. This is near where I grew up. And it was really pretty amazing. So we celebrated about a year ago. Literally, it was July of last year, and we went out on that parcel. We had a native blessing. We did the actual land transfer. There will be interpretive opportunities for people to access it. And, sort of to TPL's purpose and mission, it will continue to be there for people, and people can continue to preserve it, for generations to come. So that's a little nugget of something that I'm really, really proud of. And as I walk away from this experience at the college and join TPL, it's a really nice connecting point.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's a perfect point to end. I'm so grateful for your time. There's so much to build on, and I know everybody just feels like they know a little bit more about this incoming CEO at Trust for Public Lands. So thank you, Dr. Carrie Besnet-Hauser.
And thank you for the great ferreting out of so much information. It was really fun.
Awesome.
Thank you.
People, Nature, Big Ideas is produced by Trust for Public Land in partnership with Pretty Good Productions. Our executive producer is Thomas Clayton Miller. Our producer is Vanessa Martin, and our associate producer is Alyssa Morley. Our theme song was produced by Tall Black Guy Productions. And if you like the show, leave us a rating on iTunes and maybe mention us to a friend or two. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you all next time.